Welcome back to our Dan Education series on health and the heart as it relates to diving. We're busy with chapter 2 and this is part 3 in which we are going to be addressing the so-called issue of hyperlipidemia or high lipids, high blood fats and their effect on our health. Keep watching. There are many blood fats that we have in our bodies, but cholesterol is one of those that has been specifically linked to being a potential risk factor for particularly cardiovascular disease. Cholesterol is perhaps the most familiar fatty substance in the body. It's a soft, waxy substance, and it is only one of the fatty substances in our blood. But it is important to know that cholesterol itself is not a bad thing. In other words, without cholesterol, we'd actually die. We need cholesterol. But it is the problem, or potentially a problem, if it's elevated. Now, cholesterol forms part of our bodies and particularly our cell membranes, and it is used in the production of all our hormones such as progesterone, testosterone, estrogen, cortisone, DHEA. All of those are the products of cholesterol. The issue is if cholesterol is too high, and if it then leads to a buildup in our blood vessels which predisposes us to a potential rupture or narrowing of a blood vessel. Cholesterol is found in many foods that we eat, like meat, eggs, and dairy products, but it is also manufactured inside our bodies. Our bodies can produce cholesterol from foods that in themselves do not contain cholesterol, but do contain saturated fat. Palm oil, coconut oil, or trans fatty foods like fried foods in restaurants and commercial cakes or cookies all have substances that can ultimately be converted into cholesterol. As I said before, cholesterol by itself is not the issue. Importantly, cholesterol doesn't dissolve in our blood, it has to be carried. In fact, it's transported by proteins, so-called soluble lipoprotein particles. Now that sounds very fancy, but essentially what it means is that there are building blocks that attach to cholesterol, and some carry the cholesterol into the rest of the body, and some bring the cholesterol back to the liver where it can be reprocessed and ultimately removed from the body as bile, as part of our stool. It's really part of what colors stool brown. Now, the cholesterol carrying proteins that carry a lot of cholesterol are obviously more buoyant, and so we call them low density lipoproteins. They're the high carrying or cholesterol carrying proteins. And the ones that bring cholesterol back to the liver are somewhat less filled with cholesterol and are therefore a bit more dense and are called high density lipoproteins. Now, it's often oversimplistically said that low density lipoproteins or LDL is so-called bad cholesterol because it's associated with possible buildup of cholesterol and the formation of plaques in arteries or their walls, ultimately leading to atherosclerosis. And this contributes to hypertension, peripheral artery disease, coronary artery disease, heart attack, and stroke, as well as even erectile dysfunction in men. On the other hand, high-density lipoprotein cholesterol is typically considered so-called good cholesterol because it reduces the risk of cardiovascular disease because it transports cholesterol away from the bloodstream back to the liver and facilitates the removal of cholesterol, or at least an appropriate distribution of cholesterol throughout the body, preventing the buildup and formation of plaques in the walls of arteries. So often an individual's HDL LDL ratio will be determined to decide whether or not cholesterol is an issue for them. HDL levels are to some extent a factor of a person's genetic buildup, but HDL can be lowered by certain conditions such as type 2 diabetes and certain drugs or medications such as beta blockers. Also, anabolic steroids, which bodybuilders sometimes abuse, smoking, being overweight, and not exercising. On the other hand, estrogen, which is a female hormone, raises HDL levels, which partially explains why cardiovascular disease is less prevalent in pre-menopausal women. The third lipid in the blood that we measure typically is the so-called triglyceride or triglycerides, and they are the most common form of fat in the body. The levels vary with age and gender, and high triglycerides, especially if it's combined with high LDL levels, increases the risk of cardiovascular disease. So your cholesterol level is really a composite made up of HDL, LDL, and triglycerides. If you do a screening cholesterol test, then it measures all three of those. And to determine each of the three, HDL, LDL, and triglycerides individually, you typically need laboratory testing, although many finger prick tests are able to distinguish that nowadays as well. Many American experts recommend the following cholesterol levels. It's not carved in stone, but that's what most of the literature suggests today. Total screening cholesterol, in other words, all the components together, that's HDL, LDL, and triglycerides, should not exceed 5.2. We often refer to that as the so-called strive for 5. Within that, the LDL cholesterol, we would not want higher than somewhere between 1.8 and 3.3 millimoles per liter, depending on your health status, and the HDL cholesterol level above 1.6 millimoles per liter. Triglycerides, on the other hand, we would like to have below 3.9. And the source of this information is the American Heart Association. And they recommend that all adults age 20 and older have their cholesterol and other risk factors checked at least every 4 to 6 years, and also depending on whether there are other factors or risk factors for cardiovascular disease and stroke. This ends this section, Chapter 2, Part 3, on fats as a risk factor in compromising our heart health and its influence on diving. Please subscribe to this channel, keep watching, and thank you for supporting Dan. Until next time, safe diving.